Okay. Alright guys, welcome to week 10. So there's only 2 weeks left, and I recently decided, it's kind of the big announcement, I'm going to send out a, what do they call it, a text announcement here pretty soon, up here under announcements. Hopefully you've been checking those, but also send out a corresponding email. Basically, I'm not going to be having a final for this class like we did for the midterm, and the reason behind that is I guess I just didn't realize that in all my other classes I either have a final or a final paper, like a final draft. But here you guys have both and a presentation, and so I felt like after I was kind of thinking about it for a little while, I realized that it's kind of a ton of work for the last week. So I went ahead and dropped the final and just have the final draft and the presentation due in week 11. And so also with that, I'm going to go ahead and post, after I get finished recording these videos, I'm going to go ahead and post both of these weeks so that you can go ahead and start getting ahead. Because we actually only have, scroll this down a little bit, we actually only have 11 weeks in this course because we didn't take a week break. I guess it was for, I don't know, summer, something? I don't know. They told me I only needed to have 11 weeks unless I wanted to take a break in the middle of the semester. So instead I just dropped it off from the end of the semester and we get to end a week early. So anyways, so this week you're now finished with your rough draft. At this point the job is to start molding it into your final draft, hopefully making those edits and revisions that your peers suggested back in week 9. And now also what I want to kind of start touching on is I want you guys to go back and now start adding one more section to your essay. And I know a lot of people are thinking like, well, I'm already to the max, I'm already to the 5-page limit. This section will not be counted against you. If you go over the 5 pages, great. Not a problem as long as it's just this section that goes over those 5 pages, or the section that pushes you over those 5 pages, because your conclusion will be obviously the last section in your essay. But this, what I'm calling the implications section, should come just before your conclusion, and I'll explain that in just a few minutes. But if you go over because of that section, like if you're at the tip at the very end of 5 pages and you put this new section in there and all of a sudden you're spilling over to 6, that won't count against you. And the same idea goes for the other end of the spectrum. If you're only at 3.5 pages and this section pushes you into the 4th page, well then I'll count it for your space. So basically this section can't count against you. So now what am I talking about? Let me back up for a second here and take off my desktop and pull this guy up just so I can give you a quick refresher on what the sections are for this essay. I mean, granted, you already know what they are, but I want to talk about them a little bit. So, first and foremost, I guess I'm not so worried about your essay structure at this point. I'm more worried about you understanding what the implication section is. So if you were to think back to my earlier video about scholarly sources and how journals are structured, literature review, and the conclusion, introduction, things like that, that's where I'm going to kind of introduce this, because that's where you'll find these sections, the implication. Think about it like this. Why, I guess we'll write that, where am I at here? Get a different pen. Why are scholarly articles written? And you can have a million different answers to that, but the real reason, this goes for all articles, it's for scholarly articles, for journal articles, for dissertations, for a thesis in your master's program, if you decide to go and do that. If you're writing an article, you're doing it for one real reason, and that's to extend the current field of research. Now, what does that mean? What we're talking about here is that whenever you're expanding the field of research, think about science. We are constantly at the cusp of science. We're always pushing forward, trying to learn new things. And these journal articles are where those things are communicated to the rest of the field. So if I go out and I discover the cure for cancer, if I write, I'm going to write about it in an article. I'm going to write I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a control group and a treatment group. I'm going to give one a placebo, one group placebo, one group the actual treatment, the cure to cancer, and I'm going to show how many of those how many people got their cancer cured. And so that's essentially the study itself, but then I'm going to report my findings in my research study. And that research study, as you guys probably remember, whenever you write up the report, it's going to have an intro, it's going to have a literature review, it's going to have your method section, and it's going to have your results, and then it's going to have the conclusion. One thing that we really didn't talk too much about is how do they structure their conclusion. The conclusion in an essay is much different than the conclusion in an article. But what I want you guys to practice doing here is kind of doing both. So you'll have your normal conclusion, where you'll kind of conclude your essay and have your thought-provoking closing sentence and things like that. But I also, just before your conclusion, I want you guys to now go back after you've had some feedback and you kind of know where your essay is going. I want you to go back to your essay now and add a new section. I want you to call it the implication section. Now, I guess I need to show you what yours looks like. Your implication section is going to fall in right in front of your conclusion. You're going to be like, well, what's all this other stuff? This is how scholarly articles structured. And you're probably wondering, well, what does that have to do with my essay? Well, if you think back to a couple videos ago, I was using this section, this structure, sorry, to explain why you're using the structure that you're using for your current essay, for your field study essay. Now let's go into this. In the conclusion section of a scholarly article, they always end with a so what. Because if you spend all this time telling me about the background of, let's just use cancer because it's easy, the background of cancer, then the methods of your data collection, how you're testing your cure for cancer, right? That's that control group and that treatment group. One gets a placebo, one gets a real pill. And then your results section are, once you explain how you gathered the data in the method section, then you go to the results and you show actually the numbers behind that, the statistics behind that, and how you're determining whether or not your treatment is a true cure or not. And then the results section, oh, sorry, I missed a section. Actually, there's a discussion section right here. And after that discussion section where they kind of put it in layman's terms, they explain all these statistical analyses, all the numbers that are going to go with it, because you're going to have all these formulas and all these numbers, R equals whatever, P equals whatever, and it's going to be difficult to follow. But then the discussion is the author kind of putting it into their own interpretation, explaining to them what do these results mean. And usually they'll say, the cancer treatment was significantly had a significant impact on the people that actually took the pill as compared to the people that maybe took the placebo. It would be a significant difference, but that's a whole other class. But now when they get to the conclusion, they're answering that question, so what? And this is where they start to explain the implications of their work. Basically, what does your work mean for everybody else that's reading it? In this case, when we're talking about cancer, now, the one thing you have to consider is who is everyone. Typically, this is the real world, right? What does it mean for the real world as far as the field goes, and as far as what are the implications for society? If you have a cure for cancer, the implications are going to be huge, right? You're going to be able to cure cancer. It's going to be a big deal for people who have cancer, who maybe fear having cancer because of family traits. Maybe it's going to impact the pharmaceutical company, and because of the pharmaceutical company, it's going to impact jobs of all the people around wherever those pharmaceutical companies might be. It'll then affect the economy. Drop my lid. Anyways, you get where I'm going with it. It's going to affect all these people, and so the implications, what does that mean for everyone, are going to be huge with something like that. And so whenever you say, so what, it's not just enough to say, hey, I cured cancer. What does that actually mean? If you cured cancer, who does it affect, and how is it going to affect them? They're usually going to include that in their conclusion. Well, for you guys, what I want you to do is buy me an eraser. What I want you guys to do is to, now that you have your literature review, you explain your phenomenon, And I may have called these different things in the video, and you're welcome to call them whatever you want as long as you basically do all these things. The phenomenon is, what happened, what did you go to see, and the literature reviews where you talk about your company and all that stuff. The analysis is where you explain the theory and how that theory plays into it. And the literature review might also be not just about the company, but it might also be about the theory. And that way, whenever you talk about the phenomenon, you're explaining what did you see at that company, and then the analysis is how the theory or the lens kind of fits into your observation. Now, typically at this point, you have what's just a conclusion. Now, because I still want you guys to practice writing a normal conclusion, having your closing sentence and your closing argument, so to speak, I don't want you to include your implications in the conclusion like you would in a scholarly article, because I still want you to practice both skills. Instead, what I want you to do is move your conclusion down, just simply hit enter a couple times, and insert an implication section before your conclusion. Now the implication section, just like before, you're going to answer that so what question. What are your implications for society? What are your implications for that field? What are your implications for your own life? For that, in this case, for the organization, for the theory. Maybe you just discovered a piece of the theory that hasn't been discovered yet. And so what does that mean for the field? What are the implications that are going to be taken away from that? You explain that implication section, and then you guys have probably already written your conclusion, but if not, typically what I'm looking for here is just a review. You'll review. Typically what I do is I put one review sentence for every section. Just one sentence summary that summarizes the entire section. So one review sentence for here, one review for the phenomenon, one review for the analysis, one review for the implication, and then a closing sentence. Am I too low? No. So what I do, like I said, is you have one sentence for lit review. Make sure I'm not falling off the screen. Nope. I have my screensaver come on. There we are. And then you have one sentence for the phenomenon, one sentence for the analysis, one sentence now for the implications, and then one sentence for closing, which usually is going to link back to the thesis in some form or fashion. Cool. Oh, fit on there perfect. Nice. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for in the closing, in the conclusion. If you do it a little differently, basically I'm just looking for a summary of all the parts of the essay. You summarize everything you've told me, all the main important parts. So now this is no longer the scholarly article. Now this part is indeed what your essay, I'll say, should resemble, because it may be slightly different. Again, I can't remember what I called these sections in the earlier videos, but essentially you do the same thing, no matter what they're called. So anyways, that is what I'm looking for here. So let me get back on the computer. I'm going to pause this real quick so I don't have to awkwardly get in your face. Okay, so now what does that look like? I provided these samples here as just that sample. So go ahead and open up one of them. I'm going to open up the AFS validation, and I want you guys to scroll down to the conclusion in all of these just for a sample of what it is I'm looking for here. So if you look at the AFS validation, that's actually the activity feeling state scale that I gave you at the beginning. This is the very first study that was used where the AFS scale was used to measure motivation using self-determination theory. I think that was from week 3 or something. The very first study, I'm going to open it up in my own box here so it's a little bigger. And basically at the end they tell what are the implications behind this. Now that we have this instrument that can measure people's motivation and overall wellness in life using self-determination theory, what does that mean for everyone? I'm about to open up my own copy here and the download's going super slow. I'm going to pause this while it downloads. Okay, here we go. So now, like I said, I suggest just simply scrolling down to the very bottom to the conclusion, because in a scholarly article such as this one, it's going to be found, the implications are going to be found in the conclusion. Rarely do they actually have a section called implication section. It's just the conclusion. Because they're not writing an essay, they're writing an article. A little bit different. But that's what I want you guys to practice, is basically practice the skills that are going to get you to be able to write an article. Anyway, so here we are. The AFS scales, administered as a brief and easy to administer instrument, were designed to quantify the psychological needs of self-determination, competence, and relatedness as relatively ephemeral experiences that are sometimes nurtured by and other times frustrated by environmental events. Psychometrically, basically a metric, a measurement of psycho stuff, the individual scales are internally consistent, meaning they're consistent with what's necessary to measure this, largely uncorrelated, show high factorial validity, which means they are valid measurements of whatever it is you're trying to measure. In this case, what are we talking about here? Oh, self-determination theory. And correlate as expected with the measure of such constructs. The utility of the AFS scale is demonstrated by showing that each scale predicts intrinsic motivational outcomes. Okay, so that's kind of the implications here. Now we're able to measure and predict intrinsic motivational outcomes based on this. So how motivated are you going to be to do whatever it is you're trying to do? Thus, the AFS scales are offered as an efficient, non-intrusive, reliable, and valid measure of 3 psychological needs that give rise to intrinsic motivation: self-determination, competence, and self-determination. That's autonomy. If you remember, we called it autonomy. So basically that last sentence there is the implication for this. And thus the scales are offered as an efficient. So basically I made the scale, I'm giving it to you to use as an efficient, non-intrusive, reliable, and valid measure of 3 psychological needs that give rise to intrinsic motivation, basically that motivate people. And it's these 3. And so there's the closing with them basically explaining the implications. It's not something, you know, huge, but it is, like I said, it explains how it affects the field and what this means for people who are in the field, and in this case, self-determination theory. So that's really what we're looking for, or I'm looking for, whenever I'm talking about the implication sections, is basically explaining what does this mean to everybody else. In that case, they've made a scale that can measure motivation. In your case, what does your observation and your analysis mean for other people? What does it mean for the organization? What does it mean for people who are theorists in the theory that you chose? What does it mean for anyone that's maybe thinking about joining the company? What does it mean for the economy of that company, in which that economy is located? So there are some things to think about. And so then for week 11, I'm not going to post a video. I know it says a video here, but I'm not going to post that video. Instead, I'm just going to use this video as kind of the overview for everything, because now, once you've included your implications, revised it a little bit, edited it, and then it's time to submit the final draft. After that is the field study presentation, and basically I'm looking for you to present your final draft in presentation form. I'm trying to remember where I put the, there it is, the field study presentation rubric. So on the field study presentation, you're going to present your field study essay, the final draft. Basically explain it to us in 5 minutes. And so let me go over the field study rubric real quick so that I can show that with you. I think I did that already maybe in week 9, but if not, here it is. If you've had me before for a presentation, it's the same idea for presentation, just the details in my little rubric here are a little bit different. So the student clearly explains the theory / topic, its importance, and gives a comprehensive background. That's you basically explaining your literature review. The student presents the concepts in a language that is appropriate for the intended audience. He or she explains the benefits of implementing the theory. So that last part's easy. He or she explains the benefits of implementing the theory. Basically, why did you choose your theory? But then also, when you start talking about theories, you'll find out, if you haven't already done that, when you try to explain a theory to somebody that doesn't really know anything about that theory, you're going to kind of lose them a little bit. And so what I'm really grading you on here is how well you present your this technical stuff, how well you present it in kind of layman's terms. That's really what that first part's talking about. The student identifies opposing views. So how might someone disagree with you, and what would you say to them? Those are just some of the things that you need to be thinking about. So if that's not in your essay, you can just simply talk about it here, because it's not mandatory in your essay, but I do want you to be thinking about it and present that to us. Basically, if someone says, no, I don't think self-determination theory, I don't think that really applies here, I think it would be more of an equity theory situation, what would you say to that? And so be thinking about how people are going to argue with you, but then also be thinking about how you're going to discuss that with them from your perspective. Let's see, the presentation is meaningful, relevant, and effective in achieving the purpose of the proposal. Basically, do you communicate what you've achieved? Do you communicate that well? And the student supports his or her argument with sufficient amount of research. When you're talking about your literature review and probably your analysis, explain to us where you got your information. Maybe not necessarily cite sources, but tell us where did you get this fact? If you're giving us a fact in the middle of your presentation, tell us who said that or where you got it. And if it's something you came up with, explain how you came up with it. The student thoroughly explains the observation and the experience. That's just what it sounds like. That's the phenomenon section of your essay. Explain that to us. Explain what you experienced. And then the student provides enough information to accurately and effectively describe their analysis. That's just you describing your analysis section. And then lastly, the student closes their presentation by explaining their answer to the so what question. That's your implication section. Explain that to us. Make sure you have an engaging presentation where you keep eye contact, which is kind of weird because you have to look at the camera, but try and keep it as engaging as possible. And then of course the presentation is approximately 5 minutes. The way that I work that, let me go back to my screen. If you've had me for a class before, then you already know what I'm about to show you. Basically, I look for you to keep this under 5 minutes because it is, especially since you can edit the video, that shouldn't be a real difficult task because you can just cut parts out if you wanted to. But the way that I work that, let me explain. So if you have, it's out of 5 points, right? So you have 0, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you get (5 minutes to 5:59 seconds), that's 5 points. If you get 4 to 4:59, that's 4 points. You get 3 to 3:59, 3 points. 2 to 2:59, 2 points. Anything less than 2 minutes, that's 0 points. Okay. Now also, if you've had me before, this isn't going to be a surprise, but it might be a surprise for everybody else. I'm also going the other way. So if you're at 6 minutes to 6 minutes and 59, then you also lose a point. You're at 7 to 7:59, 8 to 8:59, or greater, 9 minutes. Then you can also lose some points. So make sure you keep that in the back of your mind, because the idea is there to keep those presentations from going any longer than they need to, because this class will be offered in classroom, and I don't want to be stuck in the classroom until 10 o'clock at night doing presentations on the night whenever they do it. So I have to hold you guys to the same standards, and so that's what I'm doing. They will also, and you are now going to earn points based on the time frame. So again, if you look back there behind me, you're shooting for right within 5 to 5:59, you get that 5 points. If you go a minute below or a minute above, then you get the 4 points, and 2 minutes above, 2 minutes below, 3 points, and so on and so forth. So I think that is officially the last bit of information I have to give you about the class, because at this point, the only thing left is now to go in, add your implication section, and then submit your final draft, and then give me a presentation using that rubric I just explained to you. So anyways, thanks for a good class, guys, and I hope that you've learned a lot, and I hope you can take something away from this into the next couple classes. And for those people who are graduating after this class, congratulations on that. And I guess I hope to see you guys in the future. Have a good week.